Welcome back, everybody. We are live on Open Line tonight. Pandy Upchurch is with us from the TWRA as we continue our discussion of all things Tennessee and wildlife and climate change and its impact here. And we've gotten some really interesting calls so far, and we're going to continue the calls right now. And welcome Joe. Joe, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind, sir?
I'm kind of concerned about in the 70s and early 80s, the environmentalists were saying get rid of aerosol cans because we're all going to freeze to death, and we blew a hole in the atmosphere, and all the warm weather is going to funnel out, and we're all going to die. And now everybody's talking about this global warming, which so I just want to know from your guest, did the environmentalists fail us? Did they lead us in the wrong direction? Ooh. And I just want to hear some comments from her.
Yeah, no, I always use the hole in the ozone as a success story, because we did manage to stop aerosol cans and chlorofluorohydrocarbons.
Yeah.
I can't believe I can still say it.
That's right. I remember that. Chlorofluorohydrocarbons.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a success story. You know, this is and climate change is different, and I don't think we're failing. We're adapting. The TWRA has a climate change adaptation strategy.
Right.
And
let's just point this out from your perspective with TWRA. It's not about politically assigning blame. There's enough politics surrounding climate change out there. So it's about, okay, here's the data that we have. We're not saying why or what, but the climate is making some changes that we can see here, like you said, warmer, wetter winters,
right,
at least in this data period.
Right.
What can we do to adjust?
Right. And
so protect.
Correct. And so what we practice is adaptive management.
Right.
We're not experts on climate change at TWRA. We're experts on wildlife. And so what what we can do is we can make our wildlife populations more resilient to whatever happens, and if we focus on maintaining, managing healthy habitats, healthy ecosystems, and making them biodiverse. Biodiversity is the number one, remedy to degradation, to whatever it is, climate change or whatever it may be. And so, in our climate change adaptation strategy is we focus on, again, broadening those riparian zones for streams. So, we did climate change vulnerability assessments for all of our species that we call species of greatest conservation need. And when we did that, we looked at what are they most vulnerable to. And brook trout, as you mentioned in your climate change plan, is one of the species that is most vulnerable.
Because of water temperature increase.
Because of water temperature, and if a high elevation species only has so far it can go up.
Yeah.
So if the temperature is rising as you're going up, they only have so far they can go. Yeah. So they are most vulnerable. So what we have to do is we have to increase the riparian zones in the streams. We have to make sure that there's leaf cover over those streams, that there's a canopy to keep the waters cool. So, we can do everything we can to make those habitats and those ecosystems resilient to whatever change happens.
Let's go to Roy on line 1. Roy, welcome. Roy, you there?
Hello, yes,
Hi.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I was wondering, I want to tell you first, I'm 92 years old. So
all right, 92 years young.
Yeah. So I've been hunting. I hunted for a lot of years, quail hunted, and I loved it on account of the dogs. It wasn't the quails so much as the dogs. I loved them dogs hunting.
Yep.
But when I was a young man, I remember we still had the weather, hot weather. I've been out in the field getting up hay, and it'd be so hot you couldn't understand it. I was young, and we still have thunderstorms, and all these things still go on. But the habitat is what, out here where I live, they took down trees and cleared up to build houses, and they built everywhere. Houses built everywhere, so they don't have no habitat. This place used to be full of turkey and birds and every kind of game, but we don't have them no more.
And
We don't have
what area
them
do you live in, Roy?
I live in, they call it Carruthers Crossing, off of Nolan's Road, Warden Road, Walden Road back
out
in there.
Okay, yes, sir.
We just don't have the things like we used to, the game, and I know that quail there's no quail no more. People got rid of their dogs because there's no quail to hunt, and the turkeys and the deer and all these that eat the eggs up, and we just don't have any.
Don't see it as
They
much.
don't tell you about that.
Yeah.
They don't tell you about the turkeys and the deer eating the quail eggs, but they do.
Right.
They do. Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you,
taking
Roy.
the call.
Listen in. We'll listen into the comments, and there's someone who's speaking from experience.
That's right. That's right. And
But
you
he's
know,
seen it. So
he
he's
has
seen it. The
He
changes.
has seen it, and we do acknowledge that our quail populations have declined to the point that when we wrote our first state wildlife action plan in 2005, we did not list any game animals as a species of greatest conservation need because we were managing for them. But in 2015, we did list northern bobwhite quail as a species of greatest conservation need. Now, that's going to help us because that means that we can now get state wildlife grant money to do research to try to find out what the problem is. Obviously, habitat. You know, quail are one of those species that require at least 40 acres. For them to nest, and it's hard to find 40 acres of good grassland anymore. So you've got several different things, and some things that we don't know that are happening. One is we're losing habitat, so our habitats are getting smaller.
Right.
The other is we're losing the quality of the habitat. The habitat's degraded. In that you have to manage grasslands. We used to burn grasses more. He's talked about haying. We used to hay grasslands more, but bobwhite quail need a scrub, shrub, it's part grass, part shrubby, and so they have to have that particular habitat, and they have to be managed for, and it has to be a good size. But the other side of that is I grew up in the country. I grew up in northwest Davidson County, and I would have to walk through a field to get to my mailbox, and there were mornings where a covey of quail would scare me to death.
Yeah.
Just flutter up and you'd fall over backwards, and that was not unusual. And who's had that experience in the last 25 years? So I really appreciate hunters that have that connection to the land, that feel it and know what's happening, and they're our biggest supporters. But yeah, if you go to very large land masses like our military bases, like Fort Campbell, if you want to hear quail call, you go to Fort Campbell.
Right.
You go to Arnold Air Force Base. You go down to Alabama, Fort McClellan. You go to these huge areas.
Open spaces.
Where they actually burn a lot and they maintain their grasslands.
Yeah.
So
makes a difference.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I love Roy that he mentioned he misses the dogs.
Oh, absolutely.
He misses the dogs.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to line 3 and welcome Ronnie. Hey, Ronnie, welcome to Open Line. Ronnie, you there?
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead, sir.
I just heard this comments about this lady. No offense to you guys, okay?
That's all right.
So I want to tell you what's wrong with squirrels.
The squirrels.
It's too many no game, too much population on this earth. It can't handle it. No offense to you now.
Okay.
There's too many people on this earth, okay?
Yep.
Look, when I moved down here from living in Alperson, moved in 1980 days.
Ronnie, where do you live? What area?
Western Clay County.
Western Clay County, okay.
Well, there's no game. There's no place for them to go. And it's why the squirrels in the yard, in the porch, and the thing. Humanity's taking all habitat up from birds. I can't understand why people can't understand that.
Yeah. All right. Hang on. Let's listen in.
We do, and 7.6 billion people is a lot of people on the planet, and so we do understand that, and we understand the need to preserve habitat for all species of wildlife. And like I said, we have almost 100 wildlife management areas and 400,000 acres of land just with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. But we need more.
Yeah.
We need to set aside what we do have. And you know what? It's not very common that we get to revert developed land back into wildlife habitat, but there's some places in West Tennessee where they've converted golf courses back into to native grasslands. And so we've got to do what we can with what we have and preserve as much as we can. And I know you're going to mention Restoring America's Wildlife Act here soon,
yes,
because that's money that we can get to purchase land and set aside more land, and that's something that we really have to do at this day and time is conserve as much land as we possibly can.
We're going to talk a little more about that, I promise, right after this break.
Okay.
Stay with us.
All right.